Hi there, and welcome back to Finding Wendy, my journey to wellness. Today is episode 5, Healing the Root Cause of Weight Gain. So today I'm very excited because I have my very first guest that I'll be talking to in my podcast today of my Finding Wendy Journey to Wellness. And I am going to be speaking with Dr. Jason Stanley. He reached out to me and asked to speak to me about my podcast series. And I've done some research and I looked up some information about him. And I thought it would be really interesting to speak to him on my podcast. So just a little bit about Jason, and he'll talk more about it himself in the podcast. But Jason began his research into the cause and cure of obesity with a medical anthropology field study in 1979. And since then, he has published multiple articles, 2 books, and conducted multiple clinical trials. So in early 2022, he began a 2-year clinical trial based on the neuroplasticity, healing the root cause of chronic emotional eating resulting in obesity. And the success rate is a whopping 85%. As compared to the standard long-term success of 3%, 97% failure for the weight loss industry. So we had a really interesting conversation this morning on Monday, August 12th, 2024. So let's dive right in, and we'll start with the interview with Jason. All right. Well, today's a special day because today I am going to be speaking with my very first guest on my Finding Wendy podcast. And today I'm very, very pleased to invite and to listen to Jason Stanley. And Jason Stanley is here to talk about some really exciting research that he has done for many years. And Jason, just and welcome for coming to my podcast channel. And we're going to be winging it today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are in the world and what you're doing and why did you study this and what prompted you to do this huge clinical study on obesity?
Oh my goodness, Wendy, thank you. Boy, does that give you a lot of room to talk? I'll be careful to not take the whole time.
No, you take as long as you want. You know, we can cut and paste and do whatever, but just go ahead. Tell us about yourself, Jason.
Alrighty, well, let's deal with the small stuff first. I live in the Philippines, and I'm here because I had spent a little over a decade in Vietnam and Thailand, and just fell in love with the Asian lifestyle. And also it ties back to my work, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I am 100% self-supported. So I'm not connected with a university. I'm not connected with any research laboratories, et cetera. So all of this work is on me. And part of that's just simply because I'm in the fortunate position to being old enough to be retired. And so I can retire comfortably here in the Philippines, and I can get a lot of the work done that would cost me, it would be prohibitive for the kind of work that I need to do. That's with the writing of the book and the editing and all of the artwork, et cetera. So that's the easy answer. Where am I? I'm in the Philippines. Why am I here? Because, I love living in Asia, and it's economically very viable for me to continue my work. So the big question, why in the world am I studying obesity? I started 44 years ago in anytime you use the word 19, you know it's a long time ago, 1979. And I was a returning student after the Vietnam War, and I needed to do a research paper, and I was really, really bad at library research. So I talked to my professor. I was studying cultural anthropology, and said, is it okay if I go out and talk to people in our community using the anthropology techniques? He said, of course. So off I went, and I'd been reading in medical anthropology books about obesity, and the thinking of the day was that it was diet. And it was the diet of the parents who had worked on the farms or the European farms and moved to America and were in now the cities. So they continued to eat the heavy diet with the hard work. Well,
I actually wrote a chapter in my book, and I've been reading parts of my book in my on this
I enjoyed
podcast.
That. If I can interrupt, I enjoyed the heck out of that in your last podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So one of the chapters is called culinary displacement syndrome. I made this word up myself, being the daughter of Dutch parents. My parents immigrated here to Canada in the 50s, and I grew up on heavy Dutch food. So you're taking and my mother used to say, culture starts in the kitchen. Right? That's a great saying. And it's really true that you grow up eating the food your parents ate, no matter what country you're in.
That's right.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. No.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you have that as a history, because that was the thinking in 1979, 1980, and a few years before that, giving publishing times. Well, I went out, and what I did, Wendy, was I talked to and really listened to obese women. I put out some advertisements. People responded. I said, this is what I'm doing, and I want to have an interview of your life history. And it turned out the third woman I talked to, when I asked her about her parents' dietary habits, well, she completely turned my world upside down, because it turned out she was a macrobiotic vegetarian, and her parents had steak and potatoes, but she opened the door to a string of invective hatred towards her father. Apparently, he was a very horrible man. And so as an anthropologist, I started asking questions about it. Turned out her life as a child was pure misery, and the only time she ever had any relief from stress was when she and her mother, without her father, were eating. Now, so I went ahead with this idea as an anthropologist. I wasn't stuck to a rigid type of a questionnaire the way you would be in sociology, and so I had the flexibility to do this. Well, turned out that I interviewed 51 more people, 51 more women, and listened carefully and prompted with these kinds of questions about childhood and stress and what have you. And it was 100% correlation with the women. Now, this is in 1979, 1980, and I'm interviewing women who are in their late 50s and early 60s. So they were raised in the 30s and 40s. We have to bring that in because it was a different culture back then. Well, I knew after doing this research, and I did some follow-up stuff with normal weight people, et cetera, that first of all, diet and exercise are not the root cause. Turns out over the years, we find out, they have feedback loops. There are issues with eating certain kinds of foods that trigger hormones that trigger this and that, but they're not the root cause. And
so I have a quick question then,
yes.
Because I just finished watching the closing ceremonies of the Olympics last night in Paris, and the one thing that they really, really were focusing on was the parity of women and men. So did you do any studies on men? Did you only do studies on women? Let's not forget about the men, because there are obese men out there as well. And did you find a similar kind of conclusion that there was a link to childhood trauma with the men as well?
The first answer is yes, I've worked with men. The second thing I have to say right now is that childhood trauma turned out to not be important.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah. Childhood
trauma is not necessary. There's a very large study, the ACEs, ACE, then ACE study, done in Southern California with many thousands of people. And it turns out that they interviewed obese people and then looking at their childhood, and a little over 50% of obese people, adults, had a high-stress childhood. Now, that's why the point I was going to make was with the people I was interviewing in 1979, they came out of the 30s and 40s, a different culture. But then as we move forward through time, childhood stress becomes less and less necessary. Now, if a person has a stressful childhood and they have solace while eating. Eating is a happy time. Then it has double impact. So I don't want to make light of it, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah, because in this last podcast that I was in my last episode where I was talking about the trigger moment. So your genetics, if you're susceptible to being, in my case, I have the obesity gene. If you're susceptible to being overweight, your environment dictates whether or not it's going to trigger your obesity. Is that something about you were saying?
Yes, we do want to get into that. Later on, we before we started rolling the camera, we talked a little bit about epigenetics, but I want to save that for just a moment because I want to get back to your question about men. So I have not done any studies on men. My first initial studies back in 79 and 80, those were all women, but the current research in the two failed clinical trials. I probably shouldn't tell your audience I failed a couple times.
No, it's good to fail. Trial. I mean, failing is a part of life. If you are 100% good at everything, then you're not a human being. We need to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm doing a good job of failing many times in life. So they were both of those failed studies had men and women in it, and more importantly, the current study, which is 2.5 years ongoing, over 100 people in it, it has, again, both male and female, all adults. However, I do want to make it clear that it's about 85, almost 90% female, and which is odd because when you look at the stats in America, it's a little over 51% of the obese population is male. But 90% of the people who go to programs and who get involved are female. That's the difference between men and women, and the whole stoic thing that men are taught, et cetera. But now back to the bottom line, and to answer this last part of your question, is the exact same things that occurred for women during childhood to create the potentiated pathways, the highways in the brain, are exactly the same for men, and the protocols for healing that is exactly the same.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So another thing where you were talking about, the yo-yo weight gain. It's not our fault. We're talking about genetics versus epigenetics. Mm-hmm. So tell us, first of all, what does epigenetics mean?
Okay. Well, first of all,
the word epigenetics. Yeah.
Epi is above or on. And most of us anyway, are pretty familiar with our genetics, the DNA, RNA code, but turns out, and only in the last few years, like the last 10, 15 years, has the study of epigenetics kind of come into our universities. And it's a patterning that sets on top of the DNA. And the epigenetics is what turns on the gene or doesn't turn on that gene. See, in every cell in your body, you have the complete DNA. In your fingernail, you have the same DNA as you have in your eye. And how does the eye cell know to be an eye cell and the fingernail cell know how to be a fingernail cell? Well, it's the epigenetics which turn that gene on or off. And now, that's really important for us. And by the way, I say us, I'm talking about myself as the researcher, but I've also struggled with weight. A bit of a yo-yo weight. I carried about 30, 40 pounds for decades, and I have reached the medical determination of obesity twice under high stress periods in my life. And now I'm normal weight. But back to epigenetics. The fat gene, which has been identified, cannot be a new thing. Genetic change, even with mutation, it's impossible for that mutation throughout the genetics of the world to be the underlying cause for the obesity that we're seeing globally. It takes, hundreds of thousands of years for this kind of a thing to happen. And it's happened, depending on who you listen to and what research you read, over the last 200 years or since the 1980s. in either case, you're not going to get a mutation that will do that. But with the epigenetics, without going too far into the science of it, let's talk about what we know really is impactful for us. First of all, does it work with humans? Yes, absolutely. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I'm going to talk about a rat study that is very, very specific. They were looking at studying epigenetics, and they figured, okay, we can look at obesity as, is this trait passed on by the father? If what is his condition? So they took a normal weight rat, overfed him, and in the lab, they know how to do that, to give him the rat feed and what have you. Anyway, made him obese, and then he sired baby rats. Those baby rats, when they matured over the course of whatever it is, 18 months or so, they were obese. The same male, they then slimmed him down, and he sired more babies. And the babies from the second batch, after he had been slimmed down, they were normal weight in adulthood. And so that's epigenetics turning on and turning off.
Wow, that is really, really interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's really fascinating because it just blows my mind. You know, I cannot believe, first of all, anybody doing any kind of tests on this teeny weeny, well, they're not teeny weeny here in Toronto, rats. They're quite big. There are lots of them. Apparently there are no rats in Alberta, I heard. It's a funny fact. But there are lots of them here in Toronto. But the thing that really fascinates me in that this entire journey, because the reason why I'm doing this podcast is because I am the rat. I have made myself the case study as to here, for my listeners who just jumped in today. I had bariatric surgery 6 years ago. I have been obese all my life. My highest weight 6 years ago was 450 pounds. I have been on every diet on the planet, and every time it worked, I lost weight, and every time I gained the weight back. And from the research I did, when I said, okay, my last choice now is to just have sleeve surgery, take 3/4 of my stomach out, and then my intake will be greatly reduced. And what happened during the pandemic, I started regaining weight. So even with bariatric surgery, you can regain weight, which is basically the cause of this whole podcast journey for me, to find, I'm always looking for an answer to why is it this happens to me and thousands and probably millions of other people. And if it's the epigenetics, if it's the fat gene, if it's your environment, what country you live in, your parents, there's so many variables. But why is it that some people are skinny and why are some people fat?
I believe I found the answer. Now, I've been studying this for 44 years, so it's not like I just decided it was something interesting.
But if you really found the answer, okay. Well, let's continue on. I'm very excited with this episode so far. This interview is fascinating. I find it fascinating, and I hope my listeners find it fascinating. On to you, Jason.
Your story is while very personal and very, very important to you, is not at all unique. Now, I don't mean that you're not unique. I just mean that your story isn't. 51% of the people who have bariatric surgery, first of all, 99.99% of people who have the surgery, that means everybody who lives through it loses weight. But within 5 years, over half have gained the weight back. They're heavier 5 years later than they were when they had the surgery. So it's clearly losing the weight's not the issue. Now, let me back away from that for a little bit, because that's an extreme. You said you've lost weight on every diet you've taken. Well, yes. Well, you go out there and the research is pretty clear that 90 to 95% of the people who put their money down and join a program lose the weight. So 95% success. Hooray, fist pump, right? But 18 months, a simple year and a half later, 97% of the people who've lost weight gain it back. So we have to be asking why. That says that the weight loss industry not only is a failure, but it's doing the wrong thing. Losing weight is dealing with a symptom. It's like going to the doctor and say, "Doc, my arm hurts." And the guy says, "Okay, well, let's see what's going on here. Oh, you broke your arm. Here, let me give you a shot for the pain." And that's, okay, no, it doesn't hurt anymore. Job done. Treating the symptom, not the cause. So that's just kind of my prelude into, now I've been looking for this for a long, long time. So, and for your listeners, Wendy doesn't know what I'm about to say. She's read some of my stuff, but I'm going to be talking about the brain. But before I get into the brain, I've got to say one thing, and it's not your fault.
No.
And I'd really, really mean that. And
it's not my fault, and I said that over and over again, and that actually takes an awful big load off my back. It's like a big, okay, all right, it's not my fault. But I was listening to another podcast last night about a woman who was saying, it's not my fault, because an important thing that she was talking about was she was had type 2 diabetes, and that everything she tried really affected her insulin levels. Mm-hmm. So it's so complicated. And I guess that's basically why the diet industry basically knows it's very complicated, and they pour gajillions of dollars into their products. And anyway, you go on. Right. There's so much to talk about. Ozempic, Wegovy, insulin levels. But the important note here, and the important message for everybody listening: it's not your fault. It's not your fault,
and I can show you why.
All right, Jason, go do it.
Go.
All right. Let's hear how.
Hear how and why. And, the how, we hear somebody had a bad childhood and they become a bad person or whatever. Well, it's not their fault that they had the bad childhood, but the behavior after that is their responsibility. Now, at this point in your education, it's not your fault, and so far it's not been your responsibility. Now, I know that sounds like I'm trying to let you off the hook. I'm actually not. But after I found my research in this last 2.5 years, I've got an 80 to 85% success rate with healing compulsive eating. That's that chronic, constant urge that's just back there tickling you all the time, that never lets go. That urge to eat, that just, I'm not going to do this. Losing weight is the hardest work you'll ever do. You talk about maybe going back to school and getting another degree. That's easy compared to losing 100 pounds.
It's really very, very difficult. And the stigma of a fat person, they're lazy and they're stupid and they lay.
The truth.
It's. I would say that every person that's overweight has the hardest job in the world. And it's really, really hard with motivation, with self-discipline. Mm-hmm. And so going back to training your brain not to binge eat, because, again, for my listeners, just a reminder, I'm on Vyvanse. And Vyvanse treats is treating my binge eating disorder. And what from the research that I've done with Ozempic or with Wegovy, that it also tames that urge to eat.
It does. It does do that. It's very effective and it's very good. It's very costly. But even more importantly, it's a lifetime medication. As soon as you stop it, you come back and there's, in the psychiatric world, there's some terms for it, the blow up, and the weight comes roaring back. Yep. So it's not a cure. It's a medical intervention. Yep. And, if somebody's at the 600-pound level and they're in a dire medical emergency, well, then, yes, take it. Help get it down. But here's the thing. It doesn't get to the root cause. And we have to ask, to find the root cause, the way I went to it was, understood that something in childhood set this up. Now, I have to keep that and put that on the shelf for a minute. So we have to ask the question, why? And you asked it just a moment ago. Why do some people eat? You didn't use this term, but it's important. Why do some people eat when they're stressed? Other people, when stressed, they can't eat. Yet others, when they're stressed, it makes no difference on their weight. So, and take a long-term stress, something that is has a duration, a sick parent, a sick child, a divorce, something that's this long, what I call
paying your
grinding
bills.
stress.
Paying your bills.
Exactly.
It's very,
or
very expensive world now.
just being obese is stressful.
Yep.
And you were talking about it just a moment ago. So, but that long-term grinding stress, that is where people gain the most weight. But that's also the people who can't eat when they're under stress. That's when they lose the weight. So why is that? So it's not, why do we overeat? Well, I overeat when I'm stressed. Okay, but why? That is as the question that I've been working on for all these years. What I found, and I'm going to just kind of shorten this up into a concise thing. What I found is that in the amygdala, which is think of a sentry at the military guard post, the person who's out at the gate, halt, who goes there kind of a thing. Well, the amygdala is that part of your brain that recognizes danger, and it gets patterned where it always will recognize this thing, and it will take you to a place of safety. Now, something we're probably a lot more familiar with, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here to kind of make sense of this, is PTSD. So take a person, now I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm old enough to be there, plus I've lived there. And so, but the Vietnam vet, the guy who has been living for 50 years in a cardboard box, because when he gets triggered, whatever that triggering mechanism is, he can't not do the negative behavior, whether it's hit his boss, walk away from his job, cuss out his wife, whatever the deal is. But he's been doing this for 50 years, and he knows that the next time he's triggered, he's going to spend 48 hours on the roof with a shotgun. He knows that's not productive. He knows that's going to make a problem. His kids won't talk to him. His wife has divorced him. He's lost his jobs over and over and over, but he can't not do it. And what that's about is there's a part of the amygdala that gets patterned. Now, in science terminology, that's a permanently potentiated neural pathway. So we can take this that we know about somebody who went through the war, whether it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago, and that's permanent. Why does the brain have that? That's another why question. Why do we have this ability? Because no matter how you spin it, it is not productive to the species. You may save one person. Let's say a woman gets, go back to Native Americans, and a young woman gets in a real close call, almost gets killed with some wolves. So for the rest of her life, she has PTSD around wolves. And so she sees a wolf, she grabs the children and saves them. Great. Maybe her family will survive better because she had PTSD. That doesn't do anything for the Native Americans on the other coast. There's 15 language differences. Or those up in Alaska or in Australia, the Aboriginals, the hunter-gatherers of the time. So this is not a species issue. But if we look at the brain, how does the brain develop? We go back and look at hunter-gatherers and say, okay, we were hunter-gatherers as a species all the way back before we were actually the current species. So we have hundreds of thousands of generations hunter-gatherers. Just like today, children have always played with toys that look like the adults' tools. Little kids get dollhouses and toolboxes and little trucks and little cars, and Barbie has her cars, and all this. So back then, and we know this from ethnographers who studied the Native Americans when they first got here, when the Europeans first showed up, and on into the next 7,500 years, that the little children played with toys that mimicked the adults. So the little boys were given bow and arrow from the time they were 3 years old. And so when this little boy, his mother said, I need you to shoot the mice because they're going to eat our food. if in the winter it's coming, it's going to snow. If let's say they're in a region where they had snow, when he did that, he got nothing but praise. The mom praised him, the dad praised him, everybody praised him. Oh, you're a great hunter, you're going to be a great man, et cetera, et cetera. So this was accolades. He got told how good he was because he could shoot a mouse. And now when that young man grows up and has children of his own, when he gets stressed, this is where the amygdala comes in. Stress is perceived as danger. The amygdala, it's that sentry, as I said, it's that guard that's out there, halt, who goes there? When the amygdala receives input, whether it's from the 5 physical senses or emotional, it goes to what it knows is safety. And it's very, very fast. It's faster than your brain. Now, we've all walked around the corner and saw a garden hose laying on the ground and jumped, or a rope, thinking it's a snake. Well, that's the amygdala in process. It's making you jump before you, it's just a hose. What am I jumping for? So, but it has no language. So all of your psychotherapy, all of your social programs, Weight Watchers, et cetera, all of your cognitive behavior therapy, all of that stuff can't impact this because it does not have language. It's purely danger or safety.
Well, let's just
danger, safety.
So let's process this, because of course my brain is exploding right now, because it's like, okay, so this is a whole new thing that I've never heard of. Because when you were talking about kids mimicking their parents, and I'm thinking, well, my nephew plays video games 24/7, and he loves video games, and a lot of young people love video games. Mm-hmm. And so in the video games, they're shooting things, shooting people. So if that goes with your analogy where you're mimicking your environment, where you're shooting people, I don't know, but it's just it's really, really interesting to use that example of a garden hose thinking it's a snake. So this part of your brain doesn't have a language. So how do you learn this language? How do you study this language of the amygdala that has this non-language area?
Well, you don't learn the language of that. What we know from working with PTSD is that, first of all, let me go back to, you ask a very sophisticated question, by the way. This is very sophisticated. So in the potentiated neural pathway, when you look at inside the brain, we've all seen pictures of the brain where you've got these long, skinny little things, and that's the neural network. And so if you think of my arm as a part of the network, my fist is the end. The next neuron is next to it, and there's a little gap that's called the synapse. And what happens, if you're having a thought, right now we're thinking, listeners are thinking of what I'm saying, and inside that nerve or neuron, electricity is pushing a chemical, a molecule down. And that molecule gets to the end, and the electricity hits it, and it jumps that molecule across that synapse, a little tiny area, and it lands over on the other side.
So it's like a little lightning strike, like a little lightning spark. Right.
Exactly. But it's that molecule that goes, not the electricity, the molecule goes pow, and it lands over here. So it like shoots the little molecule over. But the molecule, when it lands on the receiving side of the synapse, it's a smooth surface like the palm of your hand. There's nothing for it to get, but it has to get inside. Well, what happens instantaneously, I mean, really, really fast, and it's going all the time at amazing speed. But this is the same process that goes on in all of our cells throughout our body. When that lands, a portal is opened up. And the portal that comes in is called an AMPAR receptor. Forgive me for using the technical term.
That's okay. Maybe there's some scientists listening to this podcast. Who knows?
Well, what happens is that receptor opens up and it sucks the molecule inside, or the molecule goes inside, and then it is either released into the brain or brought back into the inside the neuron, and that closes up and it's back to a smooth surface. And it goes on down. Now, that's the normal way. But under high stress, PTSD level stress, that little portal gets stuck. Gets stuck there, and it stays there permanently for the rest of your life. Except if you activate that pathway. So you say, okay, we know what triggered somebody. They were at 9/11. They were walking down the staircase trying to get out. Clearly, that was a traumatic situation. So you have them recall it, but then you introduce delta wave to the brain. Now, delta wave is a natural, normal wave. We go through beta, which is what you and I are most likely in right now. That's kind of the thinking brainwave. As you're going to sleep or in deep meditation, you go into alpha, and then you go into theta as the lighter levels of sleep, and then the very deep sleep is delta. So that's normal. Now, if you're in a very excited state, like you have a fender bender or you get into a big argument, you go up to gamma, and that's where the brain is really just zooming, where it's going real slow in delta. So if you activate this memory and then introduce delta wave, which we know how to do this, that will unwind or unweld that AMPAR receptor. And what happens is salt comes up. There's a certain type of salt will come up out of the soup that's inside the neuron, and it dissolves the proteins that are holding that portal in place.
So my biggest question is, because this is all very, very technical, but
yes, it is. And I apologize for the technical.
That's not a problem, because the way that my brain is, I need visuals. So in the sense that, because I'm a visual person, explain how you're able to see that this actually happened with all of these microscopic things that are happening, like, is there a camera in somebody's brain that's watching this? Like, I'm thinking like a film. Like like I said, I'm a visual person. So how in the world can you see all of these things happening if it's a microscopic thing, but also time-wise? If you're like I know you can slow down time and study, how an atom works and all that kind of stuff, and. But how did you how do you know this stuff?
I did not. Okay, I didn't research this. This is work the neuroscientists are doing it. How do they do it? I'm going to have to tell you, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I personally don't know.
You just researched it. Okay, all right. So that's good. That's good for me. Yeah.
And really, it's a fascinating question, but I will never know. And it's not like I'm being like it doesn't matter. It matters hugely. But for me, at my level, what I'm doing is I'm in the application side of things. I'm not in the pure research. Okay. And I need to know what do I do? How do I get this person's brain to remove this permanent structure so that they will no longer have the compulsion?
Right.
So to your question, I'm sure somebody out there who's brilliant, many times smarter than I am, can answer that, but I can't.
Okay. That's good to know. And it's good to know for our listeners, because that's for me, like, where does this research come from? Who did this? Yeah. I know that there's like this world out there, the research world, and my hat's off to these people that are and yourself, so dedicated to doing that kind of research to find out, because PTSD, I actually think me and thousands or millions of other overweight people have a form of PTSD that is just a trauma that is being triggered. A trauma, or this, in the case of the way you explain it, this wall, I see like a brick wall that needs to be broken down and accessed in order to, and not doing that in a medical way, not doing that with any drugs, with Wegovy or with Ozempic, or in my case with Vyvanse. How can we break down that wall and relearn and turn off that binge eating drive?
Right. And that's the question that I really do want to answer. Yeah. And that is what my research has been. As I said, 2.5 years. I'm wrapping it up right now. there's a therapy called havening. There's two therapies that we know work real well on the dissolving this pathway in the amygdala. It doesn't remove the memory. It just removes that portal so it doesn't become a highway. Think of a highway going across the desert with these little bridges every time you have an arroyo or where the wash is, because you get the spring rains. Well, if somebody went out and took all those bridges out, you could still go, but you would go down the highway at 60, get to where the bridge is gone, slow down, put it in four-wheel drive down, come back up, get back on the highway and go. Well, that's the way our brain works. But if all the bridges are in, that's the road we will always go down. And that's the thing. Now, the amygdala sees danger. That's all it sees. Now, if it's a saber-toothed tiger or the 18-wheeler diesel truck on the wrong lane coming at you, it sees fear, or the garden hose perceived as a snake or a real snake. The amygdala has you respond to that. Now, if as a child, your patterning was, while I'm eating, I am accepted. Now, I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about from the age of about 3 till 12, those years. While I'm eating, I'm having fun. And that can also include if I'm eating while I'm watching TV. Now, when I was a kid, remember, I'm old. I was born in 1950. So
I was born in 1959. You're not that much older than me.
But there was a big difference between 50 and 59.
Yeah,
and that is in 1960. I'll round you up and give you a year off. In the 60s, it became normal in many homes, not all, that you could eat dinner on a TV tray while you were watching TV.
Yes.
In my generation, that was absolutely verboten. You did not watch TV. Absolutely not. You sat down at the table and you ate, and you had your elbows off the table and you sat up straight. And you said, yes, ma'am, no, sir.
Yes.
Manners were expected of you.
Yeah, so well, they were expected. They were expected in my generation. Well, we had the elbows off the table thing. Is your head going to fall off? Elbows off the table. Yes, yes.
Yeah. But now, if you're watching TV while you're eating, there's no stress. There's no strain.
That's right. That's right.
It's all pure entertainment. So while I'm eating, I'm entertained. Therefore, I am good. I'm a good child. And that's the connection. So when this is, by the way, I've got 100% correlation with this. I know correlation is not causation, but 100%. You can't just throw that out either. And I have interviewed over 1,000 people over the years, in-depth, deep history interviews. And I've not talked to a single obese person that doesn't fit that situation. Some are stressed, some are not. But
my binge eating happens at night on the couch watching TV. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's havening. So what is that? Yeah.
I'm sorry? Say that again?
Havening. Havening, you said? Those words.
Haven, like safe haven.
Havening. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now, for your listeners and people who are watching this is not woo-woo. This is science, okay?
Woo-woo.
I'm not being woo-woo here. I'm being
okay,
science.
No, woo-woo.
Exactly. I forget the professor's name, but there's a professor down in one of the southern states universities. And what they did was they put vibrating pads on the entire body, one spot at a time. And they had the head wired with the EEG and looked at what the brain waves were. So we know what happens if we put a vibrating pad on the back of our hand or on the palm of our hand. Well, it turns out that if we stimulate certain skin parts across the forehead, on the upper planes of the cheeks, not below the cheekbone, but on the upper planes of the cheeks.
Just under the eye.
Yes, under the eye.
For the listeners, because we're listening to this podcast, we don't see you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
So under the eye, on the cheeks, but not below the cheekbone, because below the cheekbone, male or female, you have hair follicles. Mm-hmm. That's a different kind of a hair skin. Mm-hmm. The skin on the forehead and under the eye, but on the cheeks, that's called gametic skin. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the palm of your hand. So your listeners, just quickly look at your own hand, look at the skin on your palm, and then look at the skin on the back. It's very different skin. Well, the skin on the palm is the same as the skin on your forehead and the same as the skin on the outside of your arms in this one particular thing. It has nerve endings in there that stimulates the brain to create delta wave.
Okay.
So right now, for your listeners, I am rubbing my forehead with my fingers, just going across my forehead with my fingers, and with a modest pressure. And as I'm speaking, I'm creating 90 times, that's 900%, 90 times more delta wave than my brain normally has. So now, if I bring up a memory, and in my work, I bring up the memory of that time when you were eating dinner and it was a happy time and everybody was joyful or whatever, or you're sitting there watching TV and enjoying it and you're just having a great time. It's your favorite TV show. But I bring that memory up while I'm creating the delta wave in the brain.
And while you're rubbing your head with your hands, your fingers, and your forehead.
Yes.
Yeah.
So while I'm creating delta wave, while I have this memory activated. Now,
but not while you're eating. You're doing it not eating, not what you're eating, not while you're eating. Okay, because I've heard or seen people that are to relieve stress are tapping their head or doing tapping the top of their fingers. But is that a sort of delta wave related to what you're saying now with this?
It's related. It's not the same thing. When they're doing tapping, they're doing emotional freedom technique or TFT, which is you'll tap at the base of the eyebrow.
Yeah.
And on the side of the eye and under the eye. Now, it turns out those are based on meridian points, and they have nothing in their research. They don't have any connection to understanding the delta wave, but it turns out that it is fortuitous that tapping on the at the base of the eyebrow, just if you just use one finger and tap, that creates delta wave. Delta wave is the relaxing wave. So yes, when people are doing that, it's actually working.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're down here tapping on their collarbone, that does nothing for them as far as relaxing it. But,
so you're saying with your fingertips that you're going to be like smoothing out some cream on your forehead. That's So that's what you're saying will help with the delta wave. What exactly it creates a delta wave. And by creating this delta wave, because for me and our listeners, we're trying to figure out how is this possible? What is it doing? Why is it creating a delta wave?
Other than stimulating the nerves in that particular body of skin that was called gametic skin, I don't know what it's doing.
Okay, so let's go
back to my deal. How does it? Go. What do I have to do to make it work? That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, you've got a very inquisitive mind. But so as I'm doing this, we know because we can put the pads on our head, we can do an EEG on the brain and say, as I stimulate this skin, I get 90 times the amount of delta wave. When I rub down the outside of my arm, I get 30 times the amount of delta wave. When I rub my hands, the palms of my hands together, or stimulate the skin on the palm of my hand, I get between 15 and 30 times. How does that work? I don't know. But we do know that is the result. And when we have the delta wave in the brain, and we at the same time have the memory stimulated, so that pathway is stimulated, then that dissolves those little bridges.
Okay, so
depotentiates.
We're going back to the brick wall thing. So going back to your explanation of one arm and the other arm, and then this little gap between
the synapse. Yes,
the little gap that is there, and that you had because of some sort of traumatic thing that happened sometime in your life or whatever. There's this wall that needs to be broken down. So with this delta technique of rubbing your fingers on your forehead, that will help break down the wall. So then my question is, if I have this feeling coming up that, let's just take my Wendy world, it's During the day, I have no issues with food, no issues with binge eating. So at night, when I'm after my dinner, around the 8 o'clock, 8:30 period is the binge eating alarm that goes off in my head. And then I go out and I magically find myself at a store, magically buying a bag of popcorn or some chocolate and come back to the couch with an overwhelming feeling of, and then I feel like, okay, I have it. I haven't even opened it yet. And I feel that endorphins, rising, like it's this is going to make me feel better. I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm going to have the bag of popcorn or the chocolate bar, and then regret sets in. And, why did I do that? And I end up having to throw out half of the popcorn I didn't eat. And I go to bed feeling really stupid. And, I did it again. And it's this vicious circle. So now my question is, using this Delta technique, if I, at this alarm hour, I'm just imaging, like I picture my TV with this big red siren light on top of it. It's basically what happens. Like, oot, oot, oot. I can add sound effects to my podcast, but I'll just be the sound effect right now that alarm goes off. If I were to start rubbing my fingers on my forehead around 8 o'clock, how will that help with that?
By itself, no.
No. Okay.
By itself, no. But well, no, don't stop. Don't. Let's not give up.
So we won't give up, but it can't be that simple. There's got to be.
It can't be that simple. No,
it can't be that simple. Okay. But that I'm going to be rubbing my fingers on my head, and that wall will be broken. By itself,
that won't do it.
No. Okay.
First of all, let's back up a little bit. There's two things I want to clarify. One is to do the program that I'm working with. It takes about 20 weeks or 20 sessions.
I see.
Of this, so it's not a one-time just do it and fix it. It's not that simple. It's rather complex. Secondly, the scenario that you painted, which is a binging moment or that the craving moment, whether it's now not all people who have cravings are binge eaters. You can overeat many, many ways. You can graze. You can have seconds or thirds, etc.
I graze. I graze now at night because of my constricted stomach. Because I have the surgery, I can't finish off a whole thing at once. It's a process, right?
So traditional binging of getting 6,000 calories is out. But
it's out of the question. Yeah.
Okay. So, but when that craving hits you, that's what you were talking about, is the craving.
Yes, the craving.
Okay, but one thing I do want to back up. You use the term the wall. There is no wall. It's the opposite of a wall. It's a highway.
Okay.
It's a highway. So we need to dissolve the highway rather than break down the wall.
I see. Okay.
So we're going to be dissolving this highway. Alrighty. Now, but directly, so the thing that I'm talking about, or I've talked about so far, is that we're going to be doing this, stimulating the three. And by the way, your listeners, look up havening, like a safe haven. Just look it up, and there are plenty of videos that show it on YouTube, etc. You can get a basic understanding of how it works. So you're doing the havening and creating the delta, and you have activated this memory. Well, it's going to take about 20 sessions, but that's very different than if you have the craving. So when in my research, I had people who were no longer emotionally triggered to compulsively eat, yet they still had cravings. So dealing with that is a separate kind of a thing. Now, is a craving an addiction? Well, partly, maybe, yes. We don't really know. Is it the compulsion? Well, again, partly, maybe. We don't really know. So, but we do know what works. Okay? And I was going to talk about EMDR a moment ago. And EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization repatterning, it's accepted by the American Psychiatric Association. And what you do is you move your eyes laterally left to right while holding your head still. And that also creates delta wave. But that was figured out by a psychiatrist that if you move your eyes left and right and bring up the memories, you can, they didn't know how or why. This was back in the 80s when people were still thinking the brain was a brick after you were an adolescent, but they knew it worked.
Yeah.
So now,
so
back
Jason,
to what I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll wrap this last piece up. I know we're going to run out of time.
Because because it's just because it's a lot of information for me, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. And I think that this could be something that we could talk about in another podcast as well to continue on. So to our listeners, to look up havening. That's something I have. My best friend is a nurse, and I asked her just quickly, "What is havening?" And she started on it, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that maybe know about havening. I've never heard of the word, never knew about this thing, and but I interrupted you. So just to my listeners, we are going to continue this conversation again in another podcast, because I know for myself, I don't think podcasts should be longer than 45 minutes in general, because it's too long for anybody to process. And most people are listening, like myself, at a podcast when they're at the gym or they're driving or they're going. And a podcast that's 2.5 hours is just ridiculous. I think it's too long. I just think it's too long. But I interrupted you. What was your last thought that you were going to say?
I was going to tell you that there is a protocol for cravings, but let's hold that off for the next time.
Sure.
We'll talk about how to do that.
Yeah, because that I think for my own homework and for the listeners too, havening is a great research topic to look at and to because. And interesting, again, I was listening to another podcast last night, and I'm kind of trying to, the obesity code podcast with Torontonian Jason Fung, Dr. Jason Fung, who's done all this great research as well, and his podcast is fantastic. I highly recommend it to the listeners to listen to that. And it's just a very exciting world for me. Like I said, I am the experiment. I am the mouse in the cage trying to figure out, what would work best for me. And that Jason, in his podcast last night called Blaming the Victim, was talking about an obese woman who basically had a really, really hard time with her insulin levels, and that she kept on having to take insulin, and it kept on going up and up and up. And that in the end, when she discovered the technique of fasting, she was able to bring her insulin levels down to the point where she almost didn't have to take any extra insulin, because obviously, I don't want to be on Vyvanse the rest of my my lifetime. And that, going back to the argument about all diets work, medication diets or non-medical diets, all diets work. But the moment you stop taking it or stop doing it, you regain the weight. So if we're able to find a technique that is not medically induced, obviously with bariatric surgery, there's nothing I can do. 3/4 of my stomach is now gone, but my brain is not gone. And that was the biggest wake up call for me with this whole bariatric journey, is that, my arm was broken. Let's reset it, put a cast on. Now your arm works. So they took out 3/4 of my stomach, and now I can no longer eat 6,000 or 8,000 calories at once, but I still can graze. And that is the issue, that the brain part, or in this case, the neurons or whatever that's in your brain, that is
in the brain. Yeah, you're right. It's the brain.
The binge eating or the PTSD or whatever it is, the neurons in the brain are still there and still active and still part of my genetics and still waiting to be woken up. Oh, there they are again. I always see myself as like the same thing as a drug addict or an alcoholic. If you if you have an alcoholic in the house, and you let's put it this way, An alcoholic can never, ever have alcohol in the house because his brain wants the alcohol. And it's like me, I try to have cookies in the house and the cookies are screaming, come and eat me, come and eat me, or chocolate or popcorn or anything. I can't have it in the house because it's an addiction. I'm an addict. I'm a food addict. And so, I'm sorry, I'm going on. I'm going off.
Wendy, let me address that very, very quickly. And this will be my close. All right.
Okay.
This will be my close. All right. First of all, compulsion is stronger than addiction. Addiction is stronger than habit. And habits are stronger than culture. So we look at automatic behaviors. And the compulsive overeating is the hardest thing there is. So when you say you call yourself an addict, you're actually making light of the situation. We know that cocaine addiction has about a 30% cure rate. If you recall, I said that obesity has a 3% cure rate. I termed it as a 97% failure. But that's 10 to 1 better, more success with cocaine addiction than it is with overeating. So alone,
my head is blowing up.
and see, when you put that together, you say, wait a minute. That's why I can absolutely say it's not your fault. You're fighting something that's 10 times harder than cocaine or alcohol or heroin addiction. It's 10 times harder than that. Yeah. And so, but my work actually has figured out how to dissolve that. So that compulsion goes away.
Interesting.
Not your fault.
Not my fault.
Your fault.
Well, we are definitely going to come back to this discussion, and I think it's an amazing thing that you reached out to me and said, "Let's talk," because I to be honest, I was like, okay. Is this quackery? Is this, snake oil? Is this snake oil quackery? There's actually a show. There was a show, a very short time, but there was a show on TV. Is this snake oil? I think there was a show at one point, and is this quackery? Because that's the thing, this is the answer. Oh, this is the answer. Oh, this is the answer. And that's the whole premise of the whole obesity diet industry, is that we have the new cure, and as other people were talking about this whole Ozempic and Wegovy wave. I've been watching the Olympics for the last 2 weeks, and here I just wanted to mention this live on the podcast so that I was aghast when watching the Olympics. First of all, the only people that have cable and watch live TV are baby boomers and older. Millennials don't have cable. They don't watch TV. Right. Us couch sitting baby boomers and older binge eat and watch the Olympics. And what were the commercials on CBC? Every single commercial was about Ozempic. So talk about fat shaming. So here you are watching all of these incredible athletes doing these incredible things at the Olympics. And then there's a commercial break, and the commercial break is reminding you you're fat. Here, have some Ozempic. I heard that the pharmaceutical company that owns Ozempic is Danish, is more rich than the Danish economy, like GBT. The same with CNN. You go to CNN, every other commercial is Wegovy. So there's this wave right now, like, this is the cure. This is the cure. Take Ozempic or Wegovy to your obesity, to the people that are watching TV who are probably 80 or 90% overweight. They're the ones that are eating up these commercials. So I just wanted to get it out there because I was shocked when CBC, every single commercial was about Ozempic. And here we are watching all of these incredible athletes and incredible, beautiful, lean bodies who worked very, very hard to get where they are. And then you're rudely reminded, oh, I need to stop eating these chips while I'm eating this because I can go out and get Ozempic and stick a needle in my stomach and lose weight. It's not the answer.
It is not. No. And it's $1,000 a week.
It's very expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really interesting, and I'm going to stop recording now, but I'll ask you to just stay on for a second.
Sure.
And thank you to everybody who listened today. And Jason will be back for sure, and we'll continue this conversation. And you can look up just quickly for people that want to research you. Tell us about your book and where to find it.
Well, the book is not finished. I published 2 books on weight loss, and I had bad information in them, one in 2000, one in 2007. Those were the clinical trials I mentioned earlier that didn't work. So I finally got smart, and I'm doing the clinical trial before I write the book this time.
Okay.
But let me there's a piece there, and that is that the first section of the book is written, and it's in very short, easy reading. It's under 10 pages, and it's an ebook form, and it's free on my website. So you can go get and it's just it's for the person who doesn't want the science. Just tell me what I got to do. It's that kind of a person, and it's written for that person. So the first 10 pages, I put it together as an ebook, and it's on my website, and the website is nevergaintheweightback.com. Nevergaintheweightback.com. Go on there. It's halfway down on the site. Click on it. Get the free ebook.
Yeah.
The book will be out in about 8 or 10 months.
Okay. Well, it's Never Gain the Weight Back. Nevergaintheweightback.com. Nevergaintheweightback.com. Say it 3 times. Hopefully you'll remember. Never gain the weight back. And so
that's the problem. We always gain it back.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. It's been like mind blowing, and I'll stop recording now. But for everybody, please tune in again, and please take a look at that first chapter, nevergaintheweightback.com. Thank you so much, Jason. Just hang on, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, well, that's it. That's all the time we have for today's episode. I'm sorry it went way past the 45-minute mark. I thought over an hour, but I hope you found this information and discussion and interview with Dr. Jason Stanley interesting. I sure as heck did. He'll definitely be back for further discussions in about a month or so. So remember, it's a journey, and we're all taking this together, and even the small steps count. So thanks again for joining me, and don't forget to check out Jason's ebook at nevergaintheweightback.com, and I'll add his link in the description part of my podcast as well. So if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, please reach out to me, and remember that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So until next time, take care of yourself and be kind to yourself. Bye-bye for now.